The whiskey hurt my eyes as it trickled down my face, the amber liquid seeping into the collar of my nicest shirt, which I had carefully purchased for my 55th birthday. I was motionless in our living room, surrounded by my husband Hudson's buddies, their laughter piercing through me like shards of glass. Hudson smirked and raised his empty glass in a faux toast. "Now, will you grab me another drink?" More laughs. I noticed Frank Thompson's wife avoid her gaze, her smile strained and awkward. We had known each other for decades, and our children had grown up together. Yet in that moment she was a stranger, complicit in my humiliation. 30 years of marriage were reduced to this. Standing in my own house, soaked with booze, being treated like hired help, rather than a partner wife or woman deserving of respect. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I believe you've all had enough," I added gently. Hudson's face clouded. "What have you just said?" The room went quiet. I broke from the script by laughing at his nastiness, cleaning myself off and returning with new beverages and a smile on my face. "I said you'd had enough." My speech was more steady than I felt. "It is becoming late." Hudson laughed, but there was no humor about it. "You heard her, gentlemen. The celebration has ended since the birthday girl is exhausted." As his buddies said their uncomfortable goodbyes, I withdrew to our restroom and looked at my mirror. Mascara spilled down my cheeks and grey roots appeared at my temples. I had planned to colour them before my birthday dinner, which Hudson had forgotten about. When did I become this person? This shell that leaped at her husband's directions, made excuses for his actions, and gradually abandoned all dreams and desires until there was nothing left but to serve others. That night, I slept in the guest room, something I'd never done before. Hudson did not come seeking for me. In the dawn light, I glided around the house like a ghost, Hudson snoring in our bedroom. I opened my laptop and performed something I had been planning for months. I purchased a train ticket to Seacliff, a beach hamlet 3 hours north, where my college classmate Diane had relocated following her divorce. Next, I contacted my daughter Emma, who lives across the country with her husband and 2 grandkids. "Mum, is everything okay?" "It's so early there," she said, her voice filled with anxiety. "I needed to ask you something essential," I said, surprised by my cool demeanor. "Would you hate me if I left your father?" Silence stretched between us, followed by a little intake of air. "Mum, I have been waiting for this call for years." Her comments triggered something in me. I'd been so anxious about sheltering my children from the reality about their father, about keeping the idea of our beautiful family alive, but they'd seen right through it all. I spent the next several hours packing basics into 2 bags, including clothing, toiletries, pictures, and the leather-bound diary my grandmother had given me decades ago, which was still blank after all these years. I jotted a quick letter for Hudson and placed it on the kitchen counter. It simply stated, "I deserve better than last night. Do not try to contact me for a while." Mrs. Garcia from next door was watering her roses as I loaded my baggage into my car's trunk. She stared at me with a knowing gaze. "Where are you going, Elaine?" she inquired gently. "I'm not sure I said. But I believe I'm finally going to figure out who I am without him." She nodded and approached me, taking out a tiny card from her pocket. "My sister manages a women's center. They assist those who need to recall who they are." I accepted the card, moved by her observation. For years, I'd put on a happy front at neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties, while Hudson charmed everyone. How many people saw through it? As I drove away from the house where I'd lived for 25 years, I felt a strange lightness. My hands should have shaken. My heart should have been broken. Instead, with each mile between me and Hudson, I found myself breathing deeper. My phone buzzed continuously in the passenger seat. Hudson no certainly woke up to find me gone. I turned it off and placed it in my handbag. Whatever fury, deception, or promises greeted me on that screen could wait. I was 3 hours into my adventure when I stopped at a magnificent overlook. The water spread out before me, big and strong. I got out of the car, the salt air filling my lungs, maybe the first true breath I'd had in years. That's when I noticed it. A modest art gallery situated amid tourist stores with a window showcasing colourful watercolour seascapes. A hand-painted sign advertised art classes. Every Wednesday, discover your inner artist. I had a sense of familiarity. Before Hudson, before I became Mrs. Elaine Wellington, I was Elaine Reeves, an art student with aspirations of painting the world with big strokes and beautiful colours. Hudson's criticisms about impractical hobbies and unnecessary spending eroded my confidence. Thus, Elaine was gradually removed. I walked into the gallery attracted by a power greater than habit or terror. An elderly woman with silver hair braided glanced up from the desk and smiled. "Just browsing?" she asked. Actually, I surprised myself by saying I'd like to sign up for the Wednesday class. As I completed the registration form, entering my maiden name for the first time in decades, my phone began to ring from within my bag. I had switched it back on to use the GPS. Through the cloth, I could see Hudson's name illuminated on the screen. The gallery owner turned his attention to the sound. "Do you have to obtain that?" I hesitated, my hand resting on my purse. Hudson would be mad right now. He hadn't spent a single day managing the household. He wouldn't know where anything was, which bills needed to be paid, or what appointments were set. For 30 years, I had served as his life's unseen infrastructure. What if I simply disappeared from that role? The phone became silent and then quickly started ringing again. Outside the gallery window, the ocean maintained its endless beat with tremendous waves pounding against old cliffs. Time had altered them both, but the rocks stood firm, worn, yet unflappable. I let the telephone ring. I hushed my phone and returned it to my handbag. For the first time in decades, Hudson's requests went unanswered. "I am Martha, the gallery owner," said, offering her hand. "Welcome to Seacliff Arts." "Elaine." I said the name felt both exotic and familiar on my tongue. "Elaine Reeves." Martha's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Well, Elaine Reeves, the next class is tomorrow. I am excited to see what you make." As I exited the exhibition, my watch displayed a text notice from Emma rather than Hudson. "Mum and Dad have phoned me 3 times already. Are you okay?" I instantly typed back. "I am fine. I just need some space. Love you." Diane had given me her guest room for as long as I wanted, but I wasn't ready to explain myself to anybody, including an old friend. Instead, I slept at the Seacliff Inn, a charming Victorian-style bed and breakfast overlooking the bay. The young woman at reception did not question why a woman my age was traveling alone, or why my hands trembled slightly as I filled out the registration form. My room was tiny, but nice, with a window seat overlooking the beach. I waited there till sundown, watching fishing boats return to the harbour and the sky turn to fire. That night, I slept better than I had in years, calmed by the distant sound of waves, rather than Hudson's erratic tossing and snoring. I awoke in the morning to sunshine shining through lace curtains and the aroma of coffee and baked bread from below. I was panicked for a little minute. I hadn't made Hudson's breakfast or put out his clothing for the day, when truth crashed over me like the tsunami. I didn't have to do those things anymore. The day was my alone. After breakfast, I explored Seacliff's modest downtown area. The seaside town was bustling with visitors and residents alike, with stores opening their doors for the summer morning. I was lured to a little store with bright outfits in the window, which contrasted with Hudson's preference for austere clothing. The saleswoman pointed to a flowing azure silk garment and added, "That blue would look lovely with your eyes." "My spouse prefers me in neutrals," I added instinctively, but then stopped myself. I mean, I used to wear a lot of neutral colours. The woman, presumably in her 50s and wearing a stunning silver bob, gave me a knowing glance. Sounds like it's time to try something fresh. An hour later, I departed with bags full of clothes I had never considered before. Bright hues patterns, and even a pair of artistic silver earrings that hung almost to my shoulders. I was both afraid and delighted by such a simple act of defiance. When I arrived to the inn in the afternoon, I noticed Hudson had left 3 voicemails. I took a big breath and began playing the first one. Elaine. This is not funny. Where in the heck are you? I have the Hendersons coming for dinner tonight and nothing is prepared. His voice was calm, yet angry. The second is time-stamped 3 hours later. Your daughter claims you're okay but needs space. What exactly does that mean? You can't simply walk out on 30 years of marriage because of a little event. You're overreacting as usual. The third from midnight. I talked with Frank Thompson. He agrees that you were being completely ridiculous. I apologize if I humiliated you. But you need to return home right now. This little trip of yours is becoming old quickly. No communication inquired whether I was safe or recognized how his actions had harmed me. Just demands reduction and enlisting allies to confirm his position. Classic Hudson. I erased the 3 mails without answering. That evening, I treated myself to supper at a tiny seafood restaurant on the pier. Dining alone has always been one of my hidden concerns. What would others say of a woman my age sitting at a table for one? But while I devoured fresh scallops and watched the moon rise over the sea, I noticed no one was gazing at me sympathetically. The waiter treated me with the same politeness as every other customer. The world had not ended because Elaine Wellington dared to exist without her spouse. As I headed back to the inn, my phone alerted me to a text message from an unfamiliar number. Elaine, it's Jack from the next door. Hudson asked me to see whether you were okay. He's rather anxious. Says you aren't answering his calls. Jack and his wife had recently moved in, a youthful couple in their 30s. We hadn't exchanged much more than greetings across the fence. Hudson, enlisting him as a flying monkey, demonstrated his desperation. I typed back, I am fine, Jack. Please let Hudson know that I need some time, and that we'll contact him when I am. Wednesday morning came with a flutter of uneasiness in my gut. I hadn't touched a paintbrush since before Emma's birth. What happens if I can't recall anything? What if I make a fool of myself? First day jitters, I asked Martha when I got to the gallery, clutching the supplies list she had given me. Is this that obvious? I managed to grin. Everyone feels it, she informed me. Art represents vulnerability. That's what gives it power. The classroom was tiny. Only 6 of us gathered around a still life arrangement of seashells and driftwood. Martha began with basic movements and muscle memory gradually returned. The proper brush grip color mixing techniques and the interaction of water and pigment on paper. My initial attempts were tentative. The strokes were too controlled, too focused on maintaining inside imaginary bounds. But as the 2-hour lesson went, something changed. The watercolors began to flow more freely, blending together in unanticipated yet lovely ways. Martha looked over my shoulder and said, "You've done this before." I acknowledged a long time ago. By the conclusion of class, I had created a painting that, while flawed, represented something authentic about the items before me. Martha insisted on displaying it on the student wall in the back of the gallery. But it's not good enough, I complained. She said, it's authentic. That is what matters in art and life. As the others left, Martha encouraged me to stay for tea. We sat in a little patio behind the museum, surrounded by potted succulents and wind chimes. So she explained, adding honey into her cup. Who are you escaping from? I almost choked on my tea. Is this that obvious? Let's just say I recognize the look, she said. I had it once, perhaps 15 years ago. Something in her serene acceptance caused the words to slip out. I told her about Hudson, the whiskey incident, and the 30 years of minor cruelties that had built up like silt, gradually burying the woman I'd once been. And now, she inquired when I was finished, what does Elaine want now? The question startled me. What did I want? For so long, my desires had been secondary to Hudson's, my children's, and everyone else's. I'm not sure I admitted. But I guess I want to find out. Martha nodded. That's a great place to start. As we chatted, black clouds formed over the water. A summer storm is developing. By the time I left the gallery, fat raindrops were falling, and the wind had increased significantly. I dashed for the inn, but the sky opened up before I could get back. Ducking into the next doorway for safety, I found myself in a little bookshop that was practically empty, save for a man refilling shelves and a calico cat napping on the checkout counter. "Looks like you got caught in it," the guy replied, looking up at my soaking form. He was around my age, with salt and pepper hair and glasses that gave him a professorial appearance. I didn't check the weather prediction, I admitted, attempting to wring out the hem of my new blue tunic. He grinned and disappeared into a back room, returning with a clean towel. "Summer storms here appear out of nowhere. I am Daniel, by the way. This is my store. Elaine." I responded graciously, receiving the towel. "I'm just visiting." "Elaine is simply visiting. You are invited to browse till the storm has passed, or there is fresh coffee in the reading corner." As I thanked him, the doorbell rang, and a harried-looking woman raced in, also soaking. "Daniel, thank heavens you are open." She shouted, "I need your help," but stopped short when she spotted me. "Oh, I apologize. I hadn't realized you had a customer." "No problem, Sarah," Daniel responded. "What is the emergency?" "The guest speaker for tonight's library event has cancelled at the last minute. Flights were delayed due to the storm. I'm looking for someone who can talk about books for 45 minutes in front of a room full of dissatisfied individuals." Daniel grimaced. "I would assist if I could, but I agreed to transport my mother to her doctor's appointment in the city." Sarah's expression sank, and I caught myself saying something that astonished even me. "I was an English professor before I married. I could discuss current American poetry if that helps." Sarah and Daniel looked at me as if I had suddenly begun speaking in tongues. "Are you serious?" Sarah inquired, hope shining in her eyes. Was I? The words had spilled out before I could comprehend their ramifications. I hadn't stood in front of a crowd in over 30 years. The notion sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet garments. Yes, I heard myself say. It has been a while, yet poetry has remained quite unchanged. Sarah's relief was evident. That'd be fantastic. The neighborhood library will host the event, which begins at 7. Nothing official, just a small meeting of our local book club and a few curious community members. As she dashed off to make preparations, promising to email details to Daniel's address, because I didn't have a local number, the entire weight of what I'd agreed to fell on me. "I suppose I've lost my mind," I said, slipping into one of the soft recliners in the reading corner. Daniel brought me a mug of coffee, his gaze soft beneath his glasses. "I believe it is daring, or stupid. Sometimes they are the same thing." He sat on the chair opposite mine. "So an English professor. What were your specialties?" The question took me back to a brightly lit university office with book-lined walls, the smell of chalk dust and coffee, and impassioned talks about imagery and metaphor. I reminisced about American woman poets, specifically confessional poets. Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton. Daniel nodded as he read of women's own anguish and change. Bidding. Something about his tone caused me to look up swiftly. "What do you mean?" His expression was kind. Not pitying, but insightful. "Elaine is merely visiting, arriving in a little seaside village, alone with a gaze that conveys both terror and determination. I noticed the symptoms of a person remaking themselves. I did it myself around 10 years ago. The storm outside had subsided to a gentle tap on the windows. Something changed inside our relationship. A recognition, a spark of understanding. My husband threw whiskey in my face on my birthday," I remarked abruptly. "After 30 years of marriage, I left the next day." Daniel did not flinch at my candor. My wife of 20 years left me for a yoga instructor. I discovered out when I arrived home early from a work trip. I gave a surprised laugh. Inappropriate, yet ultimately therapeutic. I apologize, I said. Do not be. Olivia and Jerome are quite content in Sedona producing pottery and teaching tantric breathing methods. I found my way here, to literature and tranquility. The simplicity of his acceptance sparked something in me. We spoke till the rain stopped, about poetry, grief, and second chapters. Daniel had originally hoped to retire to a bookstore, shelved for later as he worked corporate jobs to finance his wife's extravagant spending habits. When she departed, he thought she might never return. He said that the only thing holding me back was myself, and my thoughts about what my life should be like. As the light shone through the clouds, I unwillingly stood to depart. I just had a few hours to prepare for my poetry lecture. Daniel suggested that you use the office at the rear. Better than attempting to work from a hotel room. I have reference books and a computer if you need it. His unselfish kindness almost undid me. Everything in my marriage was subject to conditions such as payback or thankfulness. Thank you, I said simply. In Daniel's little office, surrounded by the soothing aroma of ancient books, I lost myself in preparation. Poetry had always been my sanctuary, a location where women's voices addressed realities that polite society chose to overlook. As I wrote down notes and chose sections to read, I sensed portions of myself waking, like limbs regaining sensation after being numb. My phone occasionally buzzed. Hudson sends more texts, becoming increasingly irritated. Elaine, that's enough. You are being childish. I have had to cancel the dinner gathering. I hope you're happy. Your sister phoned to seek for you. What should I tell people? Finally, I've spoken with a lawyer. You cannot simply depart our marriage like this. Each communication caused less concern than the last. Hudson's threats and manipulations were losing their hold on me like a spell dissolving in the light of day. I texted Emma a brief update, assuring her that I was still okay. Then I returned to my notes. By 6:30, I had put together what I believed would be an interesting discussion about how poets such as Plath Sexton and Rich turned personal sorrow into universal art. The Seacliff Community Library was a lovely renovated Victorian mansion located a few blocks from the town centre. Sarah greeted me at the door, relief spreading across her face. We have around 25 people, she muttered as she led me into a room with seats arranged in a semicircle. The majority are regulars, although there are also a few visitors. My heart pounded as I examined the tiny throng. In my previous life, I relished the excitement of the classroom, the interchange of ideas, and the moment when a student's face lit up with comprehension. Could I relive that emotion after all these years? Sarah introduced me, noting simply that I was a former professor of American literature, visiting their town, and I took a deep breath before stepping to the front of the audience. Poetry, I continued, my voice shakier than I would have wanted, is something we do more than simply study. It is something we experience. It gives voice to experiences that appear unthinkable, exposing what society would rather keep buried. My voice became more steady with time. I discussed how Sylvia Plath translated her personal pain into Lady Lazarus, a phoenix-like figure emerging from the ashes of her own demise. I talked about how Anne Sexton addressed taboo topics like mental illness, women's anger, and the oppressive nature of traditional marriage. As I read aloud, Adrienne Rich's Diving into the Wreck, about a woman examining the remains of a lost love. My voice stuck on the words. I arrived to investigate the wreckage. Words serve a function. The words are maps. I came to witness the destruction done and the treasures that remain. Looking up, I noticed faces filled with concentration. An old woman in the front row nodded, her eyes gleaming with tears. A teenage girl was hurriedly scribbling in her notepad. In that moment, I was not Hudson's increasingly invisible wife, Elaine Wellington. I was Dr. Elaine Reeves again, enthusiastic about literature and its ability to change people's lives. 45 minutes whizzed by. When I concluded, I received heartfelt and sincere applause. Several others came with inquiries or to explain how a certain poem had touched them. Emily, a teenage girl, politely requested that I look at some of her own poems. I'd be honored, I told her, really. As the crowd cleared, Sarah gripped my hand. That was fantastic. Would you like to do another session next week? We do a monthly poetry reading, and having someone with your knowledge lead the conversation would be fantastic. Before I could respond, I observed Daniel in the back of the room, resting against the doorframe and smiling gratefully. He had come to listen after closing his business. I'll think about it, I told Sarah. Later, Daniel led me back to the inn across streets wiped clean by the afternoon rain. The air smelled like salt and possibilities. You were amazing, he remarked, as if seeing someone realize who they are. His words touched something within me that had been frigid for too long. We stopped at the inn's entryway. That moment of ambiguity at the conclusion of an unanticipated relationship. Coffee tomorrow, he proposed. The cafe adjacent to the bookshop produces delicious croissants. I'd enjoy that, I said, startling myself with how readily the words flowed. In my room, I discovered an email from Emma that included an attachment. Mum, I thought you should see this. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Love you. I opened the file to see Hudson's social media post. Friends, I need your support at this trying moment. After 30 years of marriage, my wife left me without warning. I'm concerned that she's experiencing a mental collapse. If anyone has seen Elaine, please call me right away. I'm quite concerned about her mental state. There were plenty of supportive comments underneath it. People are expressing astonishment and giving prayers. A few have suggested that I am going through a transition or experiencing a midlife crisis. My hands shook as white-hot rage rushed through me. Even now, Hudson was directing the narrative, portraying himself as the worried spouse, while gently eroding my autonomy and sanity. I grabbed for my phone, my thumb resting on Hudson's contact information. One phone call might put a stop to this charade. I could set the record straight, tell our friends and family the whole truth about our marriage, about the whiskey. My sense of self has eroded gradually over the course of perhaps 30 years. But what would this accomplish? Hudson would pervert my remarks. Consider me hysterical, unstable. He had mastered our public image for decades. No confrontation was not the answer, not yet. However, neither was quiet. I looked at Hudson's post until the words blurred. After a sleepless night, I awoke with clarity and resolve. During my morning walk along the beach, the steady cadence of waves against the coast mirrored my heartbeat, relaxing and consistent. I was done allowing Hudson to determine my story. Over breakfast at the oceanfront cafe, I carefully composed my response. This is not a response or defense. Hudson wanted drama, and that would just add to it. However, this is a straightforward statement of fact. I started my own social media account. Something Hudson had always prohibited. At our age, Elaine, do not be silly. And I shared a single photograph of me smiling on the beach at morning. Friends, I've observed some worries concerning my health. I'd like to assure everyone that I am safe and well. After 30 years of putting others first, I am taking some time for personal introspection and regeneration. Thank you for respecting my privacy during this process. I included no information on Hudson's behavior. I made no accusations. The high path seemed both foreign and inspiring. By the time I met Daniel for coffee, my article had received positive feedback from old college classmates I hadn't spoken with in years. Numerous neighbors, and even Frank Thompson's wife, who responded, "Take all the time you need, Elaine." Sometimes having some distance helps to clear things up. Daniel noticed that you are pleased with yourself as you slide a cappuccino across the table. I showed him my phone. Small triumphs. His eyelids crinkled in approval. Not so little. You have just recovered your narrative. We lingered over coffee and biscuits. Conversation flows effortlessly. Daniel had come to Seacliff following his divorce, driven by recollections of boyhood summers spent with his grandparents. He bought the bookshop 3 years ago, giving it fresh life after it had been faltering. What happened in your previous life? I asked. Do you miss teaching? I'd already mentioned my background as a professor who had given up her career when Hudson's job required a cross-country move, just as I discovered I was pregnant with Emma. Sometimes Daniel conceded, but I'm finding new ways to engage with books. Reading clubs, author presentations, and the occasional surprise poetry lecture by enigmatic ladies who emerge during rainstorms. His soft teasing warmed my cheeks. When was the last time I flushed? When was the last time someone had looked at me with such genuine interest? I answered, I'm not that mysterious. I respectfully disagree, Professor Reeves. After coffee, Daniel took me around his bookstore properly. The well-organized sections, the children's area with little seats, and the rare book collection in glass cases. He proudly displayed his recent acquisition, a first copy of Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. I said that if a woman wants to create fiction or become herself, she needs money and her own space. Daniel agreed. As we walked around the shop, my phone vibrated with a text from Emma. Dad is outraged about your article. Called me demanding I tell him where you are. I did not. Then another. Also, Aunt Judith tells Elaine to go. She's urged you to leave him for years. I grinned at Hudson's surprise support from his own sister, who had always been more kind to me than him. That afternoon, I went to Martha's art class again. This time, we switched from still lifes to landscapes, putting up easels on the beach to depict the intersection of land and water. My attempts were still tentative, but Martha pushed me to try. Do not try to regulate the water, she said. Allow it to find its own course on the paper. As I let go of the brush, letting the watercolors to merge and flow, I reflected on how tightly I controlled myself in my marriage, measuring words, repressing emotions, and keeping my demands within acceptable parameters. What if I gave myself the same creative freedom that I gave to my paintings after class? I headed into town to go shopping. Seacliff had begun to seem familiar, almost like home. Sarah waved warmly as I walked by the library. Elaine. I had hoped to run into you. Your discourse elicited several nice remarks. Have you considered conducting our poetry workshop next week? The old Elaine would have declined, citing a lack of preparation time or experience. But the woman I was becoming, or maybe rediscovering, found herself nodding. I would love to, I answered, but I might not be in town for long. Even as I talked, I knew I had no set intentions. My original plan to stay with Diane had turned into something else. I had been at Seacliff for about a week, but it seemed like both an instant and a lifetime. Sarah responded, I hope you will stay. You appear to have found a spot here. That evening, when I ate alone at a tiny Italian restaurant, my phone flashed up with Hudson's name. After a week of avoiding his calls, curiosity got the best of me. I said, Elaine. His speech was well regulated, and he employed a decent tone. Finally, we need to speak. Yes, we do, I said quietly. My remark appeared to take him off guard. He had plainly anticipated either continuous quiet or heated defensiveness. Your short vacation has lasted long enough, he murmured, recovering his balance. Everyone is talking, Elaine. Your behavior is humiliating for both of us. I'm not embarrassed, I said, shocked to learn that it was true. You should be rushing off without saying anything and forsaking your obligations. Hudson. I intervened with a calm voice. I left you a note, and my only responsibility now is to myself. He scoffed. Yourself. What happens after 30 years of marriage? What about your responsibilities to me and our family name? Our children are grown and support my decision, and for you, I took a big breath. You stopped viewing me as an individual years ago. I became your housekeeper, social secretary, and accessory. The instant you hurled that drink in my face, you demonstrated how much you valued our marriage. That was a joke, Elaine. You're tossing away 30 years for a joke. No, I said gently. I'm regaining what remains of my life after spending 30 years with a man who believed humiliating me was amusing. Silence stretched between us, imparting 3 decades of whispered truths. You'll return, Hudson eventually murmured, his voice tightening. You have no other options, no career, and no money of your own. This independent lady act is exactly that, an act. A week ago, his remarks would have filled me with terror. They simply increased my determination. Hello, Hudson. My hands remained remarkably steady as I finished the conversation and blocked his number. Then I ordered tiramisu, which Hudson always said was too decadent for a woman my age. It was wonderful. Walking back to the inn beneath a starry night sky, I felt lighter than I had in years. Hudson's attempt to frighten me had failed, exposing how little power he truly had over me now. I stood outside the inn to view the full moon reflected in the water. The night air smelled of salt and blossoming jasmine from the inn's garden. For the first time in my adult life, I was solely responsible for myself. The discovery was both horrifying and exciting. A figure emerged from the shadows of the porch, Daniel holding a book. I hope I'm not intruding, he said. But I've found something I thought you'd like. He handed me a battered volume of Mary Oliver's poetry titled The Journey. When you finally realized what you needed to do and started, I read aloud from the specified page. Our eyes locked in mutual understanding. Something was blossoming between us, delicate and fresh. Would you want to take a walk on the beach? I asked hastily. Daniel grinned. I could not ask for anything better. As we walked down the moonlight coast, discussing books, hopes, and second chances, my watch vibrated with an email message. I looked down and saw a mail from an unexpected address, with a subject line that caught my attention. Elaine Wellington has received legal notice. Elaine. Is everything okay? Daniel's worried voice brought me back from the brink of fear. I'm not sure, I explained, showing him my watch screen. Hudson is making his next move. Would you want to read it now? Or... I gazed up at the broad night sky, where the moon reflected silver light on the smooth waves. This moment was too important to give in to Hudson's methods. It could wait till the morning, I concluded. This is my moment. We walked till our tracks spread behind us like a map of unknown terrain, discussing everything and nothing. Favorite poets. Childhood recollections, dreams postponed and rediscovered. When Daniel led me back to the inn, his goodnight kiss was soft and seemed like a question. I slept soundly despite the legal danger hovering over me. In the early light, I opened the email with firm hands. It came from Hudson's attorney, a man who had played golf with my husband for 20 years, while his wife and I spoke about recipes. Mrs. Wellington. This notice is to advise you that your husband wants to seek for an emergency injunction, freezing all joint assets owing to your desertion of the marital residence and obvious mental illness. The email detailed Hudson's allegations that I had departed without explanation, was rejecting communication, and was spending excessively from our joint funds. He wanted to limit my access to our funds until I got home, and discussed the marital problem calmly. I leaned back against the headboard to assimilate this knowledge. I had anticipated rage manipulation and maybe public shame, but Hudson was rising to financial warfare, attempting to cut off my resources and compel my return via economic pressure. What he didn't realize was that I had planned for this scenario. 3 days before my birthday, when he joked that I was too old to wear a certain outfit, I created a second bank account and transferred my tiny inheritance from my grandmother, which Hudson had no idea about because I'd put it in a certificate of deposit for years. It wasn't a fortune, but it could last me several months if necessary. I forwarded the email to Emma and included a small remark. Don't worry. I had expected this. Today I'm speaking with a lawyer. Then I phoned the one person who might assist me navigate these waters. My old college friend Diane, who had become a family law attorney following her own divorce, Elaine. "I had been wondering when you will call," she responded pleasantly. "Emma informed me that you had finally left that arrogant jackass." Despite everything, hearing her familiar voice and her candid assessment of Hudson made me laugh out loud. "I need your guidance, counselor." By lunchtime, I received a recommendation to a reputable attorney in the nearby city who could defend me remotely. By 2 o'clock, I'd arranged a consultation and had a better grasp of my rights. By 4, I had written a statement to Hudson's counsel that Diane characterized as perfectly intended to make him squirm. I would not be intimidated or monetarily pressured into returning. Hudson had made a huge mistake if he expected me to give up my newfound independence for money. That evening, while I was getting ready for dinner with Daniel, my phone rang with Emma's number. "Mum, are you sitting down?" Her voice had an unusual sound, halfway between horror and humor. "What happened, Dad is in the hospital." My heart lurched despite everything. "What, is he okay?" "He'll be all right," Emma reassured me. "It's only—" He attempted to prepare supper for himself last night, triggering the smoke alarm. And when the neighbors arrived, they discovered him passed out from too much scotch with a pan of something burning on the stove. I closed my eyes and pictured the situation. Hudson, who had never boiled water during our marriage, tried to cook while drinking himself to death. The emergency personnel treated him for mild smoke inhalation, and he was held overnight for monitoring owing to his blood alcohol level, Emma explained. "But here is the thing, Mum. When they were bringing him out, he continued repeating he needed you and couldn't do without you." "I see." I didn't know what else to say. "No, you don't," Emma said softly. "He does not miss you, Mum. He misses having someone prepare his meals and handle his life. There is a distinction." Her perspective, so obvious and unsparing, brought tears to my eyes. My kid knew what it had taken me decades to realize. "I understand," I whispered. "The neighbors contacted me since they could not reach you. They're concerned about his being alone after he's discharged." Emma sighed. "I informed them that I will fly out next week to check on him. But honestly, Mum, it only confirms that you made the correct decision. Dad caused this issue by never learning to care for himself." After we hung up, I sat silently at the window, watching seagulls circle against the twilight sky. I felt a complicated range of feelings, including concern for Hudson's health vindication, that his weakness was now evident to others, and an unexpected surge of sympathy for the guy who had built a life so reliant on my devotion that he couldn't live without it. Daniel arrived and found me in this quiet mood. When I explained the scenario, he provided the exact reaction I needed. "What would you want to do, Elaine?" What did I desire, rather than what I should do or what was required of me? Such a simple inquiry, yet so profound in its appreciation for my agency. "I am not going back," I stated firmly. "Emma will check on him, and he will have to learn something that all adults should know how to care for themselves." During supper at a charming restaurant overlooking the bay, I told you more about my meeting with the attorney. I would oppose Hudson's emergency plea, citing my right to financial independence throughout our separation. I would seek an equal distribution of our assets, including recognition of my contributions to our home and the career sacrifices I had made. "How about your future?" Daniel inquired, as we enjoyed tiramisu, which became a particular emblem of emancipation for me. "I'm not sure yet," I said, "but for the first time in decades, I'm eager to find out." 2 weeks later at sunset, I stood on the beach with an easel in front of me, painting the stunning color collision as day gave way to night. My skill was improving under Martha's coaching, but I would never be a professional artist. That was not the point. The thrill was in the creating, in expressing oneself without fear of being judged or dismissed. To my amazement, I received a settlement offer from Hudson's attorney. His illness appeared to have influenced his thinking, Or it may have been the counterfiling my lawyer had prepared, outlining the emotional abuse I'd suffered, and threatening to make it all public if we went to court. Whatever the reason, Hudson was suddenly open to a fair distribution of assets, including our home, which I could keep or sell as I pleased. His only condition was a secret settlement that would not jeopardize his reputation. I was tempted to acquiesce, eager to end that chapter without additional conflict. I had no desire to punish Hudson. I only wanted my independence and fair treatment. As I added deep purple to my sunset painting, I heard familiar footfall on the sand behind me. Daniel complimented my work, saying, "That's beautiful. Like you." His words warmed me more profoundly than the setting sun. Over the weeks, our relationship had evolved into something more tentative, courteous, and full of possibilities. "I've been thinking," I explained, washing my brush with seawater. "I might remain in Seacliff for a time. The library has given me a part-time work arranging literary events, and Martha wants me to assist with introductory art lessons." Daniel's smile was like a daybreak after a long night. "I had hoped you'd say that. I'm not seeking to rush into anything," I explained. "I'm still finding my way back to myself." "I get it," he murmured, grasping my paint-speckled hand in his. Some treks must be done one step at a time. As the final light disappeared from the sky, I rested against Daniel's shoulder, watching stars appear over the vast ocean. 55 years had taken me to this beach this time, and this man who saw me clearly and appreciated what he saw. It was not the life I had envisioned, but it was the one I had chosen. One brushstroke at a time, and it was stunning.